Welcome back again. Don't follow me. So next here is Kris Buytaert talking about 7 tools in the DevOps stack. So thanks for coming over again, and it's your stage.
Good morning. Who's awake? Okay, there's a bunch of people awake. I specifically asked this question because in Germany, when I ask question, nobody raises their hands. So who's using OpenStack here? See, nobody uses their hands. Sorry, that's a joke from last year. This talk is titled Another 7 Tools for Your DevOps Stack. And it kind of originates because I had absolutely no clue what I was going to talk about when Bernd asked me to come here. And I've been doing this talk, 7 tools for your, well, open source DevOps stack even. And that was a talk which I think I gave that about 10 to 15 times, and I got really bored of it. But people wanted to see that over and over again. So now we're talking about another 7 tools. For those who haven't seen me speak before, my name is Kris Buytaert. I'm this weird guy from Belgium. I started my career in open source by writing the OpenMosix how-to, like Don just mentioned. Then I actually started patching OpenMosix and doing kernel contributions and stuff like that. Became their release manager, and since then I've been active in a zillion open source communities, like Don just figured out. I've been in the MySQL community, pretty active. I've been pretty active in the Drupal community. I've been pretty active in the Puppet and Infrastructure as Code community. Somewhere along the line, by accident, Patrick Dubois and I started to organize a conference in Ghent, which also kind of made a lot of waves in the industry. That was DevOps days. And then we also started organizing config management camp, which Don was also talking about, where we brought together different open source communities in the infrastructure as code space. So I mentioned DevOps. Who knows what DevOps is? Okay, Bernd, can you come up stage and explain me? Just kidding. You could, yeah, I know. For me, DevOps is pretty much what Damon Edwards and John Willis figured out in their podcast DevOps Cafe. It's a professional and cultural moving our industry forward, trying to help people to deliver software better, faster, stronger. And when we talk about DevOps, we mainly talk about 5 key components, and it's the culture of the organization. It's how we automate everything. And when we automate everything, we mean everything. It's infrastructure, it's build environments, it's test environments. It's really automating everything. It's how we do monitoring and measurement different than 5 to 10 years ago. And Bernd figured that out and started doing another conference on that. December, I hear? OSMC, December? Yeah, December. Find that guy, he'll know. So monitoring and measurement. And then given that the DevOps movement was started by a bunch of open source guys, don't forget that when you go back to the office. Don't buy stuff, use open source tools. We share our experiences, we share our code, and the evolution we've seen there is that a lot of the infrastructure noise we get, a lot of the infrastructure people that used to write documentation now start also sharing their code, their Puppet code, their chef cookbooks and all that stuff. So that's what DevOps is about. DevOps is mainly about culture. It is less about tools, but tools are fun. So let me give you a recap of what the original 7 tools I was talking about were. The first 7 tools. I'm from Belgium. One of the reasons we claim that DevOps started there was because we have good quality beer, and beer also brings together people, so we meet, we discuss. Then there's a bunch of other tools. I've actually grayed out M Collective because it's not on my top favorite list anymore. I've seen way too much problems with it, specifically in scaling it, but it was one of the tools. It was awesome to do orchestration, but I'll talk about a bunch of alternatives here. Who uses FPM here? Maybe I should run the slides from 3 years ago again, if you're not using FPM. FPM is one of the many awesome tools built by Jordan Sissel. It's the fucking package manager, because he was frustrated with everything which is packaging. No, that was not here last year. That was Düsseldorf 2 years ago. FPM basically allows you to package anything really simple. It's a one-line command which takes source code, which takes different kinds of packages, which takes gems, Python packages, all those things, and turns them into the actual package you want to use. RPM, Debian package, whatever. It's not the kind of package you're going to end up having in a distro, but it is the perfect tool to package software internally for your organization. Another tool we were talking about was Logstash, today better known as the Elk Stack. This is what you do with your log files. We stopped just shipping log files and ignoring them. Now we're actually making sense of it. Who's using Logstash here, or the Elk Stack? Okay, so that you know. The fifth tool I was talking about back then was Graphite, because Graphite made the first attempts at making metrics easy. It still is in my stack, but it's a component on top of which we built. I was talking about Vagrant back then. We're still using Vagrant. Everybody should still be using Vagrant, because it's still one of the best tools around to build test environments and to test your code and to work locally. And obviously, one of the other things we figured out on all of the DevOps events, everywhere there's sushi, even a little small, tiny bit. And also the sushi and the beer together, that is what we share. That is where we discuss. That is where we talk about our experiences, friends to friends, over dinner. Could be pizza, but for some reason, DevOps Days events tend to have much more sushi than pizza. So, are you ready for 7 more tools? So let me start with the very first one. Docker. Who's using Docker here? In production. Not in a CI pipeline, but really front-end production. 3 people. Yeah. So that was the third tool, or the other tool. Docker, 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 Docker. Am I at 7 yet? Yeah? Okay, thanks. See you guys. This could have been Michael Ducci's Ignite from DevOps Days Amsterdam. He basically had 20 slides only claiming Docker. To me, Docker is not one of the 7 tools. It's not even close. I have a love-hate relationship with Docker. I love it in my CI pipeline to spin up a box, to package something, run a VM inside a shroud, then destroy it and get rid of it again. And it's awesome for that. And once you get it to use for a bunch of use cases it's meant for, it's really awesome. But my biggest problem I have with Docker is that it gives me more culture problems than I had before. Docker is the new tarball. Docker is the new... There's a bunch of developers in a corner, they've built something, they throw it over the corner, they throw it over the wall at 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon and say, here's a Docker container, please put it in production. What just happened? This is exactly what the DevOps movement tried to prevent. We got an artifact which we have no clue how it's built. Well, there's a Docker file, but it's a different distro. So development team A uses Fedora, the other one uses Ubuntu. Then there's a Debian box around. Who's going to maintain security? Who's going to maintain authentication? Docker is not a solution. For a lot of people, Docker generates problems. If you do it right, it's awesome. But if you walk into an organization where they say, hey, we run Docker, and the CIO comes to you and says, so we have a problem with our Dockers because I was giving a demo last week and the container crashed and they couldn't spin it up anymore. So you start talking to the guys, like, so show me the Docker file, how do you build it? Oh, we log onto it and we... what? Yeah, we log onto it, we change, we manually do stuff. So what are you running inside? Oh, so there's WebSphere, DB2. I can give you the phone number of the CIO who had that problem. This is not a joke. This is reality. And that's a culture problem. And it's a big one. and we need to fight it. We need to start bringing out the real good Docker use cases, not the rant I'm having today. And I want to see the balance shift to I love using Docker, and not, oh no, just another guy who uses Docker as a virtual machine and doesn't manage to reproduce it. Because there's way too many of those out there. So that's my rant. So now about the tools I really like to use today. So who's using Hangouts here? Not that many people. How many people have tried doing Hangouts with more than 10 people? With good quality, not publicly. Do you like the license on Google Hangouts? So we had that problem internally. We didn't want to have the meetings we had online to be on Google. And we started looking for a tool. And we found a tool. We're currently using Jitsi for this. And it's much better quality. We can run it self-hosted. There's a bunch of demo sites out there which allow you to run Jitsi and test it in public. It doesn't need any plugins if you've got a modern, recent browser. It just works. There's no 10-person limit. I mean, for the organization of config management last year, well, no, this year, but the organization was last year, we kind of ran into the point where there were more than 10 people in the discussion. So the first time because the years before we were using Hangouts, was like, oh, wait, that guy is not getting into the meeting room. He's not, oh, wait, we're more than 10. We have a problem here. With Jitsi, we never had that problem. We can just add more people and add more memory and more CPU. And it's going to scale more. And one of the culture hacks we do is we have offices, because I work for Inuit, which is one of the larger open source consultancy companies in Europe. We have offices in Ghent, Antwerp, Rotterdam, Kiev, Brno, Prague, and we want to get the team to connect. So one of the things we have an open chat room, which is open all the time, no 2-hour limit. And people just pop in, and they go like, hey, I've got a question. And then in the different rooms, we have stand-ups. So people are constantly capable of seeing each other. There's a couple of offices we just have one big TV screen where they look into the other offices. It's a really good tool to keep communication open, and it's open source. Another thing with building culture is how you release software. Who's doing release management out here? Yeah, this is going to be a complete different topic, and I'm going to jump to different tools because it's going to be 7 tools for your stack. Who's involved in release management? Who's still awake? Are you sure you're not involved in release management? Do you never have to figure out which components fit together? Who's writing, say, Ansible code here? How do you group together working roles for your infrastructure? How do you pick the roles which together make your infrastructure, which don't block each other, which don't break each other? You don't? How do you do it with Puppet? Felix? How do you do it with Puppet? No, grouping modules together which are functionally not breaking each other. You would like to do it with RTK. So the Puppet guys figured out one tool. The Ruby guys figured out another tool. They have a gem spec file somewhere, and they say these, and these versions. The Java guys figured out another tool. And I remember back in the days when we were building software at a large telco manufacturer, where we had Subversion. We were putting the same tag on all the different projects, like tens of them, which we were trying to release together and trying to get through a pipeline together. Then we had a user interface built on top of that. It was actually built in Ruby, where we had pull-down menus like, so this project, this version, this project, this version, this project, this version. Group them all together. This whole package together, it's one release. And that's the thing we're going to do together. And every single team I run into figures out that they need to manage that. They need to manage the dependencies between software. They need to manage what components together will work. And we've all got that tool already right in front of us. It's called Git. It's called Git with submodules. You take one main project, you add the submodules, and when you add the submodules, you have the reference hash to the point in time where you are using that subproject. And once you get that point, you don't need another GUI on top of that. You don't need another tool on top of that. And what Felix mentioned is R10K. And R10K, correct me if I'm wrong, is basically an evolution of Puppet Librarian, which was written by Tim Sharp, which kind of looks like this. You got a module in Puppet, which says the Nginx module written by Hendrik Veld. Its location is on GitHub, and this is the Git hash pointing to it. And every single language has figured out something like that. This is actually the equivalent in Git. These are the remotes, this is the Git hash. If you rewrite this, it's exactly the same. Now, I'm a big fan of this approach, but it makes me use yet another tool. If I use this approach, which on the left is the Git submodules, I can do that for my Puppet code, I can do that for the Java team, I can do that for Puppet, for the Ruby team, I can do that for the Drupal team, and I give them all the same pattern. And that makes life so much easier for me, because I don't need to figure out which tool they use for release management, because they're all using the same tool. And yes, there might be more elegant tools out there to solve this problem, but this one kind of solves it for a lot of different use cases. And when you start introducing DevOps, when you start introducing best practices into an organization, getting the ops people to start to do continuous delivery, to start pushing their code out at speed, that's a really valuable lesson, because those are the people we're going to need to support the application teams. And if they don't know how to do it, they're going to have a real hard time explaining to the developers how to do it. So this is a really good start to experiment. You need to figure out something how to do that. Whether you wrap it into Librarian or R10K, or, I mean, Ruby uses Librarian too, I guess. Or you use just plain Git. The idea is, if you figure out how to do this, one step ahead. And I prefer Git because it gives me one pattern. And that's a culture thing. So how many tools did I mention yet? You guys really are asleep. 3. Really? 3? I think 2, but the one I was ranting about was not in the list. So, when we talk about culture, when we talk about automation, the A is the second part. We've seen the landscape evolve. When we were doing infrastructure as code a couple of years ago, we basically were building something which was pretty static, which did not have machines spinning up left and right, where we did not have to reconfigure our load balancers at like, hey, new machine, spin it up, reconfigure it. We did not have really good service registration needs. We didn't have developers asking for 3 machines that spun up like, where's the service for this now? We didn't have that yet. We used DNS for that. So the world has evolved. The world has also evolved into a bad way, where Gartner now figures out, hey, there's a bunch of large companies who don't want to adopt speed, who haven't understood when Deming said survival is optional, that the optional part is they're going to actually die. So we need to give them a new cool thing, and they call it by model. So you have the old legacy environment and the part which is going agile, which is kind of a complete anti-pattern, because they're now telling that speed and agility does not mean you can actually have a stable platform, whereas speed and agility and doing continuous delivery and doing smaller increments actually means you're going to have a higher and a more stable platform. So I've been trying to redefine by model to, you have a fully managed, fully automated stack where you do changes like every 30 minutes when a Puppet run or a Chef run passes by, and then you have the really fast part where you do changes instantaneously. And I call that by model. I hope it catches on, because then the Gartner guys can stop with their bullshit. But you need new tools for that. You need tools that can instantly react on a change. And one of the tools I like to do that with is Consul, Who's using console here? Okay. So I've been using console mainly to do automatic reconfiguration of reverse proxies and that kind of stuff for a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. I mean, I had the luxury of working with a customer who was really trying to speed up stuff. And I think that the moment console template came out, Henrik told me, like, we're going to play with this today. And we were like, we're going to play with this today. It's going to be fun. Console is built by Mitchell, well, by HashiCorp. It kind of does much more than service discovery. It's capable of registering services based on health. It pretty much doesn't crash. It has awareness of nodes living next to each other. And it's really fun to play with. If you want to set console up, there's Puppet modules for that, which allow you to set up a console, a master, a server, which is a bootstrap, and then a bunch of agents. So you can have multi-data centers. It's going to find the other nodes when you tell them where the master is. And it basically, if you do it manually, it's just a simple JSON string. One of the things it does is it's going to show you which members it has. So you can list the members. You can see this is a test setup. Actually, this Vagrant box is on GitHub. You can pull it in. You can do Vagrant up and then file me all the bugs, because I haven't been maintaining it for a couple of months, so probably it won't work at this point. But at some point in time, it did. You can use console members to figure out what's running where, and then you start defining a service. So who recognizes this kind of health check? Bernd, wake up.
I'm awake.
Yeah, but you're not reading. You should recognize this. He's not even crying. I wrote Nagios on the screen at the NETWAYS conference, and he's not crying.
You're missing the trademark signs.
That was before Sam started repackaging stuff. So basically, console leverages the community. They just take a really good community check and they say, hey, I'm going to define a service, which in this case is Apache. I'm going to check this, and I'm only going to register this service as being active when the check is successful. Now, the moment that check is not successful, it's going to remove it from... Where is it going to remove it from? DNS. You know the title of my blog, Everything's a Fucking DNS Problem? Where's JP? Bummer. I think I already explained him this chaotic DNS setup, but, well, it actually is going to populate your DNS, and it's going to say, look, those two nodes, these are running Apache, or the service you call it. Now, if you're an application developer, there's an interesting challenge. What if both application servers, what if both Apaches go down? Where is your request going to end up? You're not even going to be able to resolve it. Think about that. That's one of the things you are going to run into. So it's going to put up the services. You're going to be able to query them. You can also query them from the key value store. You can have your applications actually call console directory and read it there, and that's probably a much better alternative. But console does much more. I had grayed out M collective. Because console to me is one of the yet another M collective alternatives. One of the things I like to do with M collective is basically run me this command on all the nodes that are running Apache. And because I now have exported, using Puppet by the way, all the nodes, I tag them as running Apache, I can now say console exec me, give me the IP address of all the machines with a tag Apache, which are running service Apache. In a bit less complex way to do it than with M collective. But I'll come back to this kind of approaches later today. Obviously, there's a Puppet module for that. It was pretty actively developed when I was playing with it. But I said most of the times I'm using this, it's because I want to have real-time reconfiguration of a service. And to do that, you need another tool. You need the combination of console with console template. What console template does, it actually watches the key value store of console, and when there's a change in a certain key value, it's going to reconfigure, or it's going to trigger an action based on that change. So, for example, this is an Nginx snippet. Well, this is actually the console template Go format, where we say, well, all the upstream servers, all the ones with Apache, give me the addresses, and reconfigure this automatically when you see there's 1 up, 2 up, 3 up, or when there's a bunch reappearing or disappearing. And that means that now I can spin up a machine, and when you're in a Puppet ecosystem, you should have waited before there's an exported resource, and then your Nginx server collects the resources and reconfigures itself, which is like, if you have 30-minute intervals, the maximum of 2 times 29 minutes, which is way too long for a service reconfiguration, or you needed to figure out, hey, let me trigger those from, say, mcollective or Ansible to actually get them done faster. I really like the combination of console and console template because it allows me to do that with pretty much no manual interactions at all. So, you see this guy popping up? I tend to work with customers. I tend to work with managers who want stuff. They want reports. They want to figure out what broke when. And they also want I want to click here for a new VM. I've been the guy who actually said, I want to see a Git log and see who defined the new VMs in here, or who actually saw the resource definition somewhere, but they want to have a click a button. And there's so many platforms they want to support. They've got proprietary stuff, they got libvirt, they got public clouds, they got all kinds of stuff. And I want to have a one place to click and a one place to figure out how their environment is working. And my favorite tool for this is Foreman. And I see a bunch of people already, it's going to the Puppet ecosystem again, which kind of is true, but it's also not true. Yes, Foreman started out as a Puppet dashboard. It started out as a way to figure out how good your environment was, which had great reports of your nodes, where you had a good view into how many nodes were reporting. I took this snapshot when we were spinning up a bunch of new boxes, but it shows me the state of my environment. There's like only 4 hosts there that need attention on a config management point of view. So we have reports. We could use it as an external node classifier. We could use a bunch of the plugins there, but we can also use it for provisioning. And I think these are kind of all the stacks we have been provisioning with it. Our own libvirt-based stack, our own Xen-based stack, AWS, DigitalOcean, OpenStack, CloudStack. We played a bit with OpenNebula, and there's a small footprint in there. They told me not to put important stuff on the lower part of the slide, so the less important stuff, I was kind of hoping it fell off. But so we've been provisioning all of those stacks with create new nodes, use the compute resource and spin them up, automatically register them, and play with them. What we're seeing today is that because in the other configuration management ecosystems, they don't have these kind of tools. They're writing all kind of plugins, because the people adopting Ansible, I also want to see reports. I also want to see what's failing where. This is actually the report of a failing Ansible run in Foreman. Daniel, one of our Dutch guys, one of our Chef guys, he's doing the same with Chef. So we're actually having environments where there's a bunch of people working with one tool, a bunch of people with another tool. They launch nodes from the same environment. They get the same reports. It's a different language they use, but it's kind of getting fun. This guy, somewhere hiding in the audience, is going to talk more about what he's doing with Foreman, I think tomorrow at 9:30. By then, you should all be awake, have sufficient coffee, and not be drunk anymore. So that's also going to be interesting. So that was Foreman. So this guy pops up again. When we talk about DevOps, we talk about giving developers access to the platform. We use Logstash to give them access to the platform, to give them access to log files. We use Graphite to give them access to instant metrics so they can build their own dashboards. But I also want to give them access to commands. Like, so if you're developing and you want to really restart that Tomcat server, sure, go ahead. But I don't want to log on to the machine. Really? You don't? And then we show them mcollective. This is too difficult. I need to have too much parameters. Sleep praise mcollective with a shell script that calls mcollective or calls console. But it's too difficult because we want to have a user interface. We want to have a web interface. And the manager says, I want to have an audit trail. I want to have logs on top of that. So we use a little tool called Rundeck for that. Basically, what Rundeck does is it gives you a way to give everybody access to a command on a platform where we can log it. They have to be logged on, so we know who run that command when. And we give them access to a bunch of really trivial actions. As an example, we created a bunch of boxes. We actually get the list of nodes from, in this case, PuppetDB, which gives us these are the 1,000 machines you have in the network with all the parameters, with all the facts where we can filter on from a GUI, which makes it easier for them. But you could get the data from any single data source you want. So you want to know what files are in the directory? I mean, typical actions which we use this for is in a Drupal, for example, clean the cache, varnish cache cleaning or restarts, figuring out if a backup has succeeded, checking if files are still at a certain place. So a simple ls on like 5 nodes together is something we use Rundeck for. These are 2 test nodes, and we get output that it was all successful, that we run it and it works. And this is pretty much the same. So we give people, how many times have I copied this? Oh, crazy. Some duplicate slides entered. So we give people a user interface on top of trivial actions. And we know that now that they have access to the actions they know, we can version them, because we can put all those jobs in Git. We can build new Rundeck servers from those sources. And obviously, the whole stack is fully automated, so we can spin up new stacks in data centers when we want. And a lot of the developers are happy with this, because now they don't have to run into a machine anymore. They don't have to type SSH, which is, I mean, to me, it's scary that they don't want that, but it gives them a better, a happier place. So what's the next part we're going to talk about in the CAMS part? Monitoring and metrics, right? There used to be a time when we were using Graphite. Who was using just Graphite? Nothing on top of it. Then there used to be Gdash, there used to be, man, there were Tattle, there were so many dashboards on top of Graphite that you couldn't keep count. Grafana popped up, and it kind of became the standard dashboard management tool. People started improving on Graphite, and they started using Influx. They started using Prometheus. But we had the one dashboard. We had the one front end for a bunch of those backends. And that's Grafana. We really can just go into the UI, pull down the list of nodes, create graphs, click and point, and within minutes, we have dashboards that people can use. This is a dashboard that one of our ops guys, one of our customers said, we're going to do a performance test on that platform. And they call us like an hour in advance. Can you show us the dashboard? So, well, yeah, we have our own dashboards, but what do you care about? Well, I want to see that. Can you? Yeah, sure. 10 minutes later, we clicked together all the metrics we were collecting in one dashboard for that customer, where we could just point him to one link, say, here's the dashboard. Is this what you need? And they went back and forth a bit and said, OK, this works. This is a good dashboard for us. They could use it. They can modify it themselves. They could template it. We can then take that same dashboard, but for different environments. Something that really, really saves a lot of time. I haven't played with the Elasticsearch backend yet. There was a time when I was hoping that both Grafana and Kibana were heading the same direction, but at some point they kind of lost track. So there's obviously slides missing. That happens when you modify your deck like 10 minutes before a talk. I kind of get to be an expert in that. The slides that missing is that there's this new thing popping up, which is Metrics 2.0. Who's heard of Metrics 2.0? So there's a great talk from the guy over at Vimeo, Belgian guy, forget his name again, who talks about correlations, who talks about the fact that we are missing out on a couple of things. Event correlation. How do you store an event in Graphite and all that kind of stuff? And when he was working at Vimeo, what's his name again? Bernd, you know? No?
Yeah, but
I've got his picture in his head. Yeah, so he used to work at Vimeo. He's now actually working for the guys who are doing Grafana, and that's where I was pointing at. The Metrics 2.0 stuff, which is at the Vimeo GitHub public repository, has kind of been disbanded, and all of those features, all of those IDs are now slowly finding their way into Grafana. So there's active development there. Oh, by the way, there's this huge misconception that Graphite is dead. That's a thread that pops up on Twitter every now and in a while. And then there's people who say like, yeah, Graphite is dead, hasn't been released for like, what do you mean? Go to the Git repository, last commit is 3 hours ago. This is absolutely not dead, this is thriving. So don't get mistaken there. There's still a lot of development going on. This is what we do with metrics. This is what we do with graphs. But there's more data. There's who's on call. There's how is traffic looking today. There's how many Ikinga alerts do we have, and how many backups did we fail, and how many issues do we have in Redmine. There's so many other data sources which we pulled out. So yes, I scrapped out the name of a bunch of customers. Our Jenkins builds were all pretty green on that one Jenkins servers. We have different people on call for different topics. Like there's people for one customer, which are application developers, and then there's people who are on call daytime, and then there's people on the night shift. And I didn't want to put their name on there. You can Google them anyhow. But you want to see that in a big dashboard. And we use dashing to do that. Now, dashing is the last tool I have in the list, but I have a love-hate relationship with dashing. I mean, it's awesome when you look at the amount of plugins were there and the simple way on how to build a dashboard and how to get there. I mean, it's get something from a Redis data backend. That's a 3-line Ruby script, which all of you can write, because I can, and I cannot write code. There's really awesome debugging features, like if you figure out how the event stream works, you can just curl that and see it pass by and see what's happening in clear text also, but for debugging, that's great. But then there's the way how to deploy it. I mean, they're really picking on the Ruby version, so you stick with the one that works and don't even try changing. The dependencies on how to build it, it's horrible. And their way of sharing dashlets is curl from a gist. Like, really? Do you really want to have code versioned in a gist? Not in a full Git repository, but a gist, which is like the only place where you can put it is GitHub. The way you build up your dashboard is awesome, but the way you have to do release management on the tree where the jobs and the widgets and all that stuff are, it's plain hell. If you look at 90% of the widgets, and 90% of the jobs, they basically go like big block of config on top in Ruby, and then the actual code. So I want to do this for multiple environments, which means I kind of need to have multiple copies or just patch all the scripts and use them and have configuration parameters in there so you can actually read the config from a file. Is anybody here writing dashing jobs? Is your config in the script? Yep. Did you fork it from Julia? Is that the Ikinga one? Okay. Because the Kinga one, which he started writing on, which is still living on, still does not have. No, that one actually has config separated. Not in your version, but in the fork from NetWays it does. So if you start writing those little gems, put the config separately, thank you. It's going to save us all a lot of time. But apart from that, it's a great tool because managers like this kind of view. It's all, oh no, it's not all green. So when I walk into the office, I say 3 on red, and they go like, oh crap, and they start fixing stuff. But usually it's green. And the goal is you're not going home unless it's green. So what tool did I forget? Docker. You can do a better guess. Come on, Bernd. You don't know? Coffee. Yeah, coffee would be a good one. No, I mean, there's this tradition that I need to say a Kinga if I'm on stage here, right? Yeah, so I missed the Kinga. Yeah, okay, thanks. The tools I missed, and it's not missed, but it's not a Kinga because I've been playing with a Kinga a lot. But the tools I missed is because I didn't spend enough time with it yet. One of the tools I'm really looking forward to play with is Vault. Key management in an infrastructure, shared secrets, it's something which is really difficult. HashiCorp released the tool there. I need to take some fun holiday like Don explained, but I need to explain that to my wife, so I probably should take a holiday and just go to the office. To play with Vault, to do stuff like that. Another HashiCorp tool, Terraform. I actually did play with Terraform, but not in the extent I really want to play with it. Just spinning up a bunch of AWS boxes together, it's fun, but I want to go much further. And there's stuff like Kubernetes and Mesos, but the next talk is going to be about those, right? Is he in the room yet? John? Oh. Oh, yeah. So those tools were not in there yet because, well, I did not have time to play with them yet. So maybe that's for the 3rd edition of another stack of DevOps tools. But really, what's the most important tool? I can talk tools all day, but DevOps is not going to be solved with tools. You're not going to fix culture by putting Puppet or Chef or Ansible in your infrastructure, and specifically not Docker. But you will get improvements when you start working together, when you start behaving like human beings and not like assholes, and you start working together with the people which code you are deploying. So yes, have fun with the tools, but take them out for beer and sushi too. And that's my message for today. And for Don and Bernd and JP, you can do gin too, but I don't like gin. Thank you. Questions? I'm hiring too, but I don't have the bumpy slide yet.
Somebody who's not hiring? Okay. You guess it. Questions?
See those Germans? It's not you. They just don't dare to ask questions.
We invented the sitting ovation. That's our thing.
The what?
The sitting ovation.
Yeah, maybe just a quick one about your console slides. You talked about tags, and just to clear it up, is it possible to read Puppet exported resource tags in your console script or in your console config?
I'm usually configuring the services I monitor and the full console config with Puppet. So if I export something, I can probably already do it there. Maybe you can explain more what exactly as an example?
You talked about reverse proxy configurations,
Yeah.
and we do that with exported resources on Puppet.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking about, why do I need console for that? Because I already got it in the exported resource from Puppet.
Speed. When I run an Nginx reverse proxy or an Apache reverse proxy, I add 2 more backends on the node, completely different ones. I run Puppet on that node, it gets configured, it exports the resource. When do you reconfigure the Nginx or the Apache? At its next Puppet run. How long does a Puppet run take? The delta between the exported resource ending in PuppetDB, your next Puppet run being triggered, for some people, if that's half an hour or 58 minutes or whatever, it's fine. But for other people, they want it's configured, change. And that's what I call bimodal. That's where I want the speed, and that's where I use console. Because the is something Puppet cannot do. Puppet can do the, it's there, but not that.
All right.
That's the only difference.
More questions?
Also, just a quick one. Are you still using Graphite, or are you
Yeah.
using something like
No.
Influx?
We're using Graphite.
Okay.
In most of the infrastructures we manage, we don't reach the scalability limits of Graphite. I've been looking into the Go rebuilds of Graphite. I've been looking into the NG builds, but we're still happy with Graphite in most of the stacks we manage.
Yeah, thank you.
We're not Google, we're not GitHub, we're not, so. Felix.
So you pointed out how, from your point of view, all the release management tools out there are broken. But
Yeah.
then you went ahead and proposed.
Well, they're not all broken. They're actually, a bunch of them do a good thing.
Right. So then you proposed Git submodules, and as you are probably aware, you're pretty much the only person ever who said that using Git submodules is a good idea. So do you have any advice for the uninitiated on how to use that without losing their mind?
There's a bunch of others that use Git submodules. There's a lot of people, when I show them a Puppet file with the Git hashes and Git submodules, they see no difference in doing it. I think the key to me is that you realize that you're working in one project isolated and you can just keep committing. But when you actually decide to group something, you need to update the hashes and then do Git push. And it's about using that workflow a couple of times, sitting next to somebody explaining the workflow. And once they've seen how the Git submodule actually is a pointer to another project, which they have control over, they usually get the point. We've seen the odd occasion where people don't update their submodules and where people are, well, getting to a point where their branches are completely disjunct, but we see that with the regular Git usage also. Maybe we should sit down together and figure out what your problem is and why people don't like Git submodules. But to me, this is one of the things that once I understood that workflow, it made me forget all the other things. I mean, compare this to Git, to Subversion tagging and tagging on all projects and creating scripts that did a +1 tag on all the things, because we were increasing the tag numbers and all that stuff, and that just didn't work. I mean, taking an abstraction layer and moving the same concept, because it's pretty much the same concept, into Puppet Library on R10K, I can see the point in doing that. But if you have multiple tools you need to support, you need to figure out the same pattern for another tool. That is basically my point. If the only thing you do is using Librarian, and it works for all the tools you have to support, by all means use Librarian, because it might be less scary than Git submodules. But if you also need to manage a Java project, and you also need to manage a Symfony project, and you need to figure out another way of doing the same work with different tools, you might actually bite through and say, hey, let's do it with submodules, because that's going to work for everybody. And we can actually put the whole team, developers and operations people together in a room and say, guys, this is how Git submodules work. Does that make sense?
I think so. So what I just took from that is you should not view your project as, okay, we used submodules and now we have this large tree that is not just one Git repo but multiple repos, but instead you say, okay, we've got several things that have dependencies and we have links to these dependencies, but that's all that is. It's not magic, and it's not like a large tree that manages itself. It's just logic.
Yeah.
Cool.
See, you got it. It's not that hard.
Apparently, I mean, yeah.
More questions?
Isn't this more of a problem with the tools you're consuming, that they're not doing enough release engineering, such that everybody that wants to use a bunch of the tools together has to make their own release engineering of it?
Should I bring up my slides, which I used to open the distribution room at FOSDEM, which was basically that topic, yeah. So the languages try to reinvent their own tools. The developers don't talk to each other and then figure out, hey, we need to do this, and never look at what's on the other side. Yes, there might be open source communities, but they don't look at what the other communities are doing. I mean, one of the best feedback I got, I think it was actually during Darmstadt at FLOSS UK, was, where's Bytebolt, where is he? Oh, it's not here yet. Colin actually said, look at what you did with Config Management Camp. You brought together all the different communities so they could talk. We kind of did the same with the MySQL community a couple of years ago when we had OpenDB Camp. We were bringing together all the different communities so they could learn from each other. And in languages, you don't see that. There's Drupal. Well, actually, Drupal kind of is merging more together with the Symfony community, but there's the Python community. They figured out their way of doing stuff. There's the Java community. They figured out something. And they're all trying to reinvent the same release management problem with their tooling. And it doesn't work for anybody. So maybe if we all step back to basics, we can build on one common ground and fix Git submodules for all it's worth. But that's basically what we're trying to do. Put out a project and say, this together. That's what I want to release.
Would it make sense to have something like that that wasn't just internal, maybe?
Yeah.
So that everybody doesn't have to redo that same work over and over again?
The tool we built 6-7 years ago, which was the GUI, which was based on subversion tags, 3 to 4 years ago, I was kind of trying to convince the management of the customer to actually release that as open source, because it was pretty good back then. And then we started working with the submodules, which was like, I don't need the UI. But as I also said, a bunch of the developers, we use stuff like Rundeck because they want the UI, and the manager wants the fancy stuff. So maybe if there's a shared community who figures out how to do that for a couple of tools and build something on top of that, or puts an abstraction layer on top of different tools, that might definitely be an interesting open source project.
Have you just reinvented the FreeBSD ports tree at that point?
Maybe.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding the Jitsi thing you mentioned. Are you only using it for collaboration or also as a chat solution? Means
No,
group
not
chat?
as a chat solution. We have our own. I think we're still running. No, we're running
Open
the.
Fire or
No,
Jabber?
we're running the Erlang-based one, which should. eJabberD. We're running eJabberD,
Okay.
which is talking to our internal LDAP, and actually Jitsi. Our Jitsi is completely public, has no authentication, whatever.
Is that the only reason why you're using two tools and not Jitsi for, because it's...
I
it
think
has
the
XMPP
main reason
support as
is time. One of the things we should do is actually, we've got a digital asset management platform, and what we do want to do is automatically record all our internal meetings and put them in a store so we can transcribe them and all that stuff. We want to hook it up to our internal LDAP. We want to have 2 instances, one public for meetings with customers and community stuff, and one for internal meetings. But basically, currently now we have 2 running. There was one which we use internally, the other publicly, and there's no user management whatsoever yet.
Okay.
That's basically time constraints.
For Jitsi, we actually use Jitsi Lead, which is paired on top of the
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay. Okay. We are through. Thank you again, Kris, for your great talk. Thank you.